Good morning, everyone. I am Jill Krumholtz, and my colleague is Ed Probst, and we are pleased to be here. And thanks, Cerini Associates, for inviting us. A little bit about myself and my firm, Real HR Solutions. It's an HR consulting firm. We're based in New York City. We do national work. Most of our focus is New York tri-state area, and most of our clients are nonprofit organizations. So very pleased to be here.
Yes, and I as well. Welcome everyone, and thank you for participating in our session. My name is Ed Probst. I'm co-founder of Vanguard Benefits. I have been working in the employee benefit space with nonprofits for just about 25 years now. I'm a registered employee benefits consultant. I've worked with thousands of employees one-on-one, as well as employers. So I think I have a lens into the employee benefit sector. And so hopefully I can give you some tips and provide some guidance as to what the latest trends are and things that you can take back to your organization. So we have a great panel for you today, or session for you today. We encourage you to use the hand raise. Jill and I would like to make this very interactive. We've worked together before and it's worked very well. So please use the hand raise, use the chat function to ask any of your questions. We have some slides that we'll go through today. But again, like we said, we want it to be very interactive. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, we will take them. And at the end, we'll do a general Q&A so that you can ask any questions. And maybe we can even use that as like an Ask the Expert type. So if it's something that's off topic that we're talking about, you can feel free to ask us anything you'd like at that point.
Thank you, Ed. So to give you an overview, we will be discussing, since I am an HR broad-based expert with over 25, 30 years, and Ed is a very strong business owner and benefits specialist. We are going to be discussing a few things. One is organizational culture and trends that are emerging, trends that we've been seeing, but trends that are really very focused on 2023 for nonprofits. Ed will be discussing mental health, health in the workplace, employee burnout, the impact of health in organizations. I will be discussing total compensation and what that looks like, compensation philosophy and strategy, talking a little bit about salary transparency and other things related to compensation. And Ed will talk about the New York health insurance market, and we'll talk a little bit about technology. And then we'll return to Ed, who will be talking about employee perks. So let's begin. And what are we seeing in terms of culture trends? In 2023, organizations really must create a culture that is welcoming and respectful for all employees. And according to Gallup, culture is a force multiplier for outcomes that matter. When properly harnessed, it becomes a powerful differentiator. So company culture has a profound impact on employee engagement, morale, and productivity. And culture trends tend to be related to hiring and retention, especially focused, as Ken had spoken about before, on younger generations. The impact of how employees feel about their organizations really impact their connection, their feeling of belonging, engagement, growth, and development. So Glassdoor several years ago did a survey, not so long ago, that 77% of their participants really consider, when looking at an organization, what the company culture is before they even look at the job. Millennials are more likely to place culture as their priority over salary. So as we start to move through, as we are talking today, we're really talking about how do you create a culture through your HR and your people programs and practices that include both internal and external selling of your organization. So your employees need to feel that you are walking the talk, that leadership is providing exposure, that all voices are allowed to be heard. And we know younger generations really very much want to be heard. We're really looking at ways to replace workspace as it relates to the hybrid situation and all the things, and I think Ed will talk about all the things that are so critical in terms of health and mental health, as well as productivity. Ken mentioned really embedding DEI in your organization and your practices, and it's not just an HR practice, and really creating a culture of learning. And this really goes hand in hand with company culture and engagement and employee growth. And, I was speaking to a client of ours yesterday, and she was talking about the culture, and the culture has always been a very big communication collaboration culture. And I think more and more it is important for all of us, whether we are consultants to your organizations or you're leaders of organizations, to really focus on communication. There really is nothing more important. So at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Ed.
Okay, so I think this is a great segue, because when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about today in this presentation and thinking about trends in the nonprofit sector or in the employer sector in general, mental health was the first thing that came to my mind. And as Jill talked about company organizational culture, and I think in today's times, in order to have a positive culture, an employer of choice culture, mental health has got to be on the forefront of that initiative. So right now, what we're seeing is there's a huge transformation going on in the employer market with the awareness of mental health and its impact on the employees, and the importance of mental health for productivity in the workplace. Some studies they're showing, we got this information from SHRM actually, 86% of employers say mental health and stress burnout is a priority. Now, this is something that really came to the forefront, obviously, from COVID. COVID really shined a light on the on mental health in the workplace, and burnout from people working at home and maybe working more hours than they were used to working and not turning it off, really caused a lot of stress and burnout. 49% of employers do not have a formal articulated well-being strategy for their workforce, and 26% had actually adopted a well-being strategy. We're seeing more of that. The calls that we're getting to our office from our clients nowadays are more about EAP programs, strategies for stress management, and things that the carriers can support their employees in order to keep them more have a more well-being strategy at work. I would say the one thing that we're seeing is the stigma of mental health is starting to be eradicated, which I think is long overdue. Gen Z, millennial type of employees, this is what they want when they go to work for an employer. I mentioned before, we've done thousands of one-on-one meetings with employees over the years. And when we meet with those millennial Gen Z type of employees, the number one question we get in our employee sessions are about mental health, whether that be physicians and whether they can be in their network or medications or things like that. And I will tell you that that is probably the biggest inquiry we get.
I will ask you, Ed, or I'll make a comment that when benefits programs, health benefits programs do not have a mental health component, am I correct that there are ancillary benefits you can get that are EAPs?
Yeah, great question. Yes, you can get EAP programs on an ancillary basis outside your carriers. However, I will say that, again, a segue into one of the things I was going to talk about, you will see that carriers are recognizing this as well on their end. We are seeing a transformation on the carrier side, and now you're seeing that your medical plans already might include EAP programs for your employees. And also they may include mental telehealth, which we're starting to see, which is a huge change in the carrier-based market. One of the reasons we're seeing this is, and I'll give an example of a client. We have a client, nonprofit, very young, energetic bunch of employees. A lot of millennials, Gen Zs. When we look at their claims report, we see a huge instance of mental health visits, right? And very, very high in that outpatient mental health visit category. And you might look at that initially, and in the past that might have been looked at negatively because it's causing a lot of claims to the plan. However, we're seeing a shift in that as well, and carriers are starting to view that as preventive services, and that this will produce healthier outcomes in the long run. So again, a transformation in the marketplace is starting to occur, and we know why. Employers and insurance companies are starting to understand that poor mental health and stress can affect employees. It can cause performance and unproductivity. It can mess with engagement of one's work, communication with coworkers, and just your physical capability and daily functioning. Depression interferes with a person's ability to complete physical job tasks about 20% of the time, and 57% of employees who report moderate depression, and 40% of those report severe depression, and they're not getting help to treat those. So they may be looking towards their employers for help when it comes to these things, and that's where some other things. Stress, employers are recognizing that stress is a big trigger to mental illness, and stress is a big trigger to unhealthy populations. So if we can control stress, which can cause headaches, it can cause sleep problems, depression, anxiety, which can weaken your immune system. If we can address those, we might have a better shot at addressing the health outcomes, which could make a long-term impact on claims and health insurance rates. And I think in the past, when we discussed wellness programs with our clients, and this was before mental health came to the forefront, they wanted to know, well, if I do this, how's it going to impact my health insurance rates? And nowadays, employers are looking at that as on a long-term basis, with not only how it'll affect my insurance rates, but how's it going to impact my productivity of my employees at work? I'll go through this quick. So some of the trends we're seeing, and maybe some of the things you might want to take back to your organizations, employers are doing things that they're investing in mental health solutions, but they're also doing things that don't cost them that much at all. Days for Me program, we're seeing employers that are providing mental health days as part of their PTO program. Mental health ally programs where they have a buddy system at work for employees that are stressed that can reach out to other employees or leaders that will help them when they're stressed. Rethinking employee assistance programs. I will say one thing about employee assistance programs is they are reactive. And employers have noticed that over the years, that investing in EAP, although can help some, doesn't get to the mass. So they're starting to look at more proactive type of initiatives that can be really more engaging with the employees. But as far as EAP goes, they're looking at increasing the number of on-site visits. Global wellness days, which could be a time mental health day for all your employees, stretch at work, physical fitness that you can do at your desk to reduce stress, guided meditation programs, de-stress stations, having a room, Zen rooms where you have rooms at work that employees can go to chill out for 10 or 15 minutes, stress mastery programs. We're working with programs that now we can bring into employers that engage the employees on how to, managers on how to look for signs that employees are burned out or stressed, and how employees can recognize their own stress and what they can do about it. And then, of course, We've even seen on-site dog parks or bring your dog to work days, things like that, and nutrition programs, which are important too, because nutrition and healthy eating, hydration programs, that all supports mental health. And I think these are a lot of things that are going on. Sorry, it took a long time there, Jill. So maybe we can turn it back over to you.
Okay. And so the segue here, while Ed and I were talking and preparing, we were thinking and I really looking at, as I hope you do, total compensation. So what we're talking about in total compensation really pulls together all the things that Ed was just talking about, right? But it includes, total comp really includes salaries, benefits, and all the other perks that an organization provides to employees. So as we talk about total comp philosophies and strategies, for-profit organizations, studies have shown recently, and the research we've read, is that for-profits at this point in time are spending a lot more of time and money, and it's not that costly, but they're spending more time looking at philosophies. So the philosophy and the strategy is really what position is your organization taking, right? If we talk about compensation, we know that part of that is whether you want to be an employer that pays at the 25%, 50th percentile, and so forth. But that compensation philosophy is really who you want to be as an organization and what are you going to provide. And the strategy piece is really how you're going to roll these things out. Now, can a total comp philosophy and a strategy change over time? Absolutely. But employees, excuse me, in this day and this time are really looking for organizations that can articulate what their strategy is, so that organizations can that employees can make decisions about whether they want to be working in your organization. So a comp philosophy and strategy is not only good for retention of people and attracting and retaining people, but it really is a roadmap to your culture and how you are going to treat your employees. And certainly has impact on your spending, right? So if you are doing a total comp philosophy and strategy, you're looking, let's say at the beginning of the year or your fiscal year, at how you're going to be spending your money and what that means to your employees. Want to move a little over to pay transparency, and pay equity. And those of you in New York City, and now I believe in Long Island and Westchester County, know that there is a pay transparency laws, and that those tend to vary based on jurisdiction, but there are probably at this point about 10 to 12 and maybe even more states in the country that have pay transparency laws. And I think best practice is such that a lot of states that do not have it are starting to put in those practices anyway, because it will become law in most states. So what does pay transparency mean? It means that one, when you're presenting a position externally, you are giving that position a pay grade, so that there's there is a range. You're giving it a range, so that if you're doing a job posting, you're putting a range of what that salary will be. And you are also being transparent to your employees. And there is no longer the ability for employers to retaliate against employees if they're talking about salary. For those of us who've been in the workforce for a long time, remember days when employees just never, ever said anything. You didn't expect them to be talking about pay. That goes back to culture and communication, and it really is the law. And it is the law now to really protect and encourage employees to have better understanding of their organization. Ed talked about employee benefits. One of the things that certainly from a people perspective time off and flexibility, and Ken mentioned this relative to all individuals, but certainly the flexibility for women who are managing their home and their children. That time off and flexibility is critical. And what we see in research is that, again, that culture and the employee benefits and the time off that people have is really critical and is really draws people to organizations. The other piece I think is rewarding and recognizing employees really increases engagement. So while the reward piece, as we talked about, which is broad, is important, and part of that is salary, and certainly you as nonprofits are really restricted in terms of your dollars and spending for salaries. There still are very, very creative ways to reward people. Ed talked about some of them, and there are others as well, where there are spot awards, or there's recognition based on meetings people are having, and how you bring that up and how you share that with your organization. So these things very much, all of these things really support engagement, productivity, and really the success of your organization and the health of your organization. So, Ed, I'm going to let
Joe,
you
we have
continue.
questions here that I think you could answer great. What are some examples of embedding DEI in the workplace?
Yeah, so DEI is, as I said before, and DEI is a organization philosophy, and it impacts every area of every functional area of your org, right? To, you know, the marketing of your organization, to your donor base, you know, your public relations, your advertising, and certainly your hiring and how you treat your employees. So examples certainly from an HR people standpoint is, where do you go to identify talent, right? So are you using job boards that attract people of color? Are you looking for people with broad gender backgrounds? So certainly there's a focus on hiring, but there really is also a focus on looking internally at through groups that you create in your organization, where you really have resource groups that look at what is happening, and really, you know, doing a survey allows you to see what your employees feel and what your culture is and how you are working on this. So I think surveys are really critical. Creating resource groups are very important. Marketing yourself externally the way you would market yourself to donors, and talking about the things that you're doing in terms of equity for people. It's really having groups where people are allowed to talk, communicate, and identify ways to bring people further together. I think there are a lot of terrific DEI consultants out there. Real HR actually works with organizations to look at diversity, equity, inclusion, but there really are just tremendous experts that can help you with that. And I think it really is about that coming from the top and really listening to employees and what their needs are. Part of it is doing equity surveys, you know, in terms of your salary. Or is your pay equitable, right? And if your pay is not equitable, whether it's male, female, across, you know, across race and so forth, you will, if you're not doing equity surveys and sharing that with your organization, you have really nothing to monitor in terms of your improvements. So really look at doing pay equity analysis and making some changes based on that. I hope that's helpful.
That was great.
Anyone else?
I don't see any other questions right now. We'll move on. We'll talk a little bit about health insurance in the marketplace.
Sure.
Jill talked a lot about total compensation, what employees might be looking for. Obviously, health insurance is critical to the recruiting and retention efforts of any organization, mostly because it's usually their number one or number two expense. And it's very hard to control and to stay within a budget when you have to provide benefits, especially in the nonprofit sector where salary competition is very difficult and benefits become even more critical. So how do you do that? How do you stay within a budget? How do you keep your benefits package competitive, but stay within your budget? For larger organizations that have 100 employees or more, we're seeing that self-insurance is on the rise. And, self-insurance is a word that can be very scary to a nonprofit organization. But we think that nonprofits should take time to educate themselves through their brokers, through the marketplace on self-insurance. Self-insurance programs that once were only for organizations and maybe 300-400 employees or more. We're seeing now that there are programs that are suitable for organizations as low as 75 enrolled employees. You must have 100. If you're in New York and you're a nonprofit organization, you must have 100 employees eligible to buy stop loss insurance, and that's critical to any self-insured program. So you would have to have 100 employees, but we're seeing 100 eligible employee organizations with less than that enrolled being suitable for self-insured programs. And there's two types. There's a level funded program that you'll see, which really is maybe your first entry point. Well, your first entry point into self-insurance might be an HRA, a health reimbursement, or a HSA, health savings account type program. But for self-insurance, level funded programs look and act a lot like fully insured programs had in the past, which are your normal relationships with insurance carriers. Only they give you the ability to share in the financial surplus if you have positive claims experience without you taking on the risk of anything higher than your insurance premiums that are given to you on your renewal, because the insurance company is taking on the financial risk above and beyond that. So you're subject to no worse than a high renewal if your claims experience is poor. But what it does give you is transparency into what's going on in your organization, what's driving cost, giving you the ability to be able to initiate programs that are directed towards those high poor outcomes or high claimants, so that you can help set up a strategy that might drive down costs in the future. Then there are fully self-insured programs where you're working with a TPA, and again, that becomes a scary word to a nonprofit organization. But with the proper stop loss initiative or program in place, you will be able to outline your risks, forecast them very, very accurately going forward, and know what your maximum liabilities are, and so that you can make a decision up front on self-insurance that won't leave you a lot of risk on the back end. So I guess the moral of the story, without going into it too much in detail, is that it's something you should definitely consider if you have over 100 employees, especially with the fully insured programs increasing more every year. The cost of fully insured premiums right now compared to what they were 5 and 10 years ago are dramatically higher than what they were. And so you need to take a look at everything you can do in order to control costs so that you can have a benefits program that's attractive to your employees. One thing I will mention in the self-insured market is direct to hospital programs. Now, this was something that has been outside the New York area, something that is more prevalent. But in the New York area, particularly with Northwell Hospital System, self-insured programs now are working with Northwell directly in order to buy care from Northwell at a reduced cost. So your normal typical relationship with a Blue Cross Blue Shield or a United Healthcare might cost 20 to 25% higher in claims to your plan than it would buying that directly from a hospital system like Northwell Health. So there are programs out there right now where you can combine your large scale network organization like a Blue Cross Blue Shield or United with a Northwell and incentivize your employees to use the Northwell system so that they can drive claims costs down for themselves, and because you can offer it at lower copays and deductibles, and for the organization as it drives down costs with those more affordable claims that are being submitted. In small group, a little bit different. Small group, the choices have condensed. There was a carrier that was in the small group market this year that we lost for all intents and purposes. That was the best value that there was in the New York market. Health First was the name of the carrier. A lot of individuals right now that were on Health First in the commercial marketplace are going to be seeking other coverage, and that is going to cost a lot more money. We're seeing that their increases are spiked right now, particularly for those that have to transition off Health First. So keep that in mind. And so that has created fewer choices. What are small employers doing about it? If you are a small employer under 100 employees and you haven't considered PEO before, you should consider it. At least get a proposal or do an analysis to see if it's right for your organization. You might be able to dramatically lower your health insurance costs as well as other costs in order to create a more attractive package. We are starting to see an uptick in ITRAs, which are individual coverage HRAs that allow you to reimburse employees for individual premiums in the marketplace. The one challenge with that is in the New York market, the choices for carriers in the individual market are really only for carriers that have more narrow type networks. So that could be a deterrent for an employee because that might be on a United or a Blue Cross Blue Shield at the time. However, it does give the employer an ability to create a stipend type arrangement where you can reimburse employees for their individual coverage on a pre-tax basis. And then, of course, I anticipate that we're already starting to see it, but I anticipate we'll see a high uptick in HSA usage as employees start to look for choices that are more affordable. They'll start to understand HSAs more and utilize them more in the future, I believe. So we have, what does PEO stand for? So it's a great question because we always say this. PEO is Professional Employer Organization, and I will tell you, you are not the only one thinking that right now and asking that question. So I should have been more clear with my acronym. Professional Employer Organization, been around for probably 30 years plus. Real quickly, a PEO it pools small businesses and organizations together to provide payroll, benefits, technology, workers' comp, among other services. So the benefit of a PEO is you may be pooled with, and depending on the PEO, you could be pooled with as high as 500,000 worksite employees. That does give scale on benefit costs. So if you're a white collar organization, particularly that has young demographics, you could benefit very well from a PEO because you might get outstanding health insurance rates. Even if you're not fitting that mold that I just mentioned, you might benefit from looking at a PEO, particularly with health insurance rates. And we have seen many times over employers transitioning from the small group market, going into a PEO and driving down costs dramatically.
If I can say more about PEOs, so many of our clients that are small organizations do work with PEOs, and as Ed said, PEOs really started with and really are driven by payroll and benefits, and they have expanded enormously, and they may provide you with employee handbook. They may listen to and deal with employee relations issues. We are often brought in to work with organizations that have PEOs, but also want kind of deeper HR services or more strategic HR services. So very often you could actually have an HR person internally who is working with that PEO. You can have the PEO and also work with an outside HR consultant to supplement what the PEO is not providing to you. But we very, very often, when we're talking to prospects and potential clients, we really do suggest to them that they look at a PEO model. And I believe that and you can say otherwise, but I believe all PEOs are co-employer situations. Is that the
Yes.
case? So they
Yes,
take on the liability, half of your liability. And so there are certain, there are certain rules and regulations and laws around that, but they do take on, and they're really become 50% of the employer. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing about that is we get to ask this question a lot. Payroll is required under a PEO, excuse me, in that co-employment arrangement. So you must move your payroll to a PEO if you're considering one. That's a good segue, Jill, if you want to start to talk maybe about technology a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, and I
I
know
we have
I'm
about
watching our
7
time.
minutes. Yep.
Yeah, I'm watching our time. I want to go back to the DEI question because I think there were a few things I did not mention. I think internally, diversity, equity, inclusion is really, it is so much more than categories of gender or people of color or disability or anything else. And it includes cross-generational, different generations in organizations. But it really is about some of the biases we all hold, right? And some of the things we do, like, if we are recruiting, and several of us on a recruiting committee come from Ivy League schools, maybe we're only looking at Ivy League, candidates. So I think it's really very, very important to consider really what your biases are and try to really work through that in the organization. I think the other piece that's really critical is looking at how people communicate. People communicate differently. And I think that there really is a push to start to do some of this analysis, whether it is Myers-Briggs or it's other things. Some of them are Myers-Briggs Light and DISC and other things that really, without doing a major deep dive, allow you to look at how people communicate with each other and what their styles are. And that really goes a long way in terms of DEI. And the last thing I want to mention is when we talk about DEI, you really want to look at your board. And does your board reflect who you want your organization to be, or the vendors you're working with, do they reflect that as well? So just wanted to go back to that for a second.
And Jill, would you say that candidates in a challenging recruiting market, they're looking for employers that have strong DEI?
Absolutely, without a doubt. And that is important to all people, especially earlier career people, where they want to be, they want to be heard and they want their colleagues to be heard. And so they want the organization to look different and be different. And that's really critical for them. And so that competition is enormous and really drives home. Not only is it good practice, but it's really very important in terms of really the health, of attracting people and the health of your organization. So I'm going to segue over to technology. And what we have seen is that organizations that do not have technology, and we're talking about, HR people technology, wind up having a lot more HR folks that are doing administrative functions. And so when we talk about helping organizations to put in technology, really looking at changing the balance of what their need is in terms of the HR team. So, technology enhances an employee experience. It improves the recruiting results. It addresses hybrid workplace. It's able to identify gaps. It builds internal talent capability. And what does this mean? This means that if in fact you are working with a technology provider, that there are things that you can do and things you should look into, and different modules and different capabilities to see what they can offer you. And again, it may be an LMS system, learning management system. It could be looking at people's performance reviews, being able to capture that information. The more information you have on your employees, the better off you are in terms of moving the organization forward. So, we would say that optimizing on current technology that you have is really the way to go, to see and even bring in either someone internally or someone externally who can help you to look at your technology, what it provides for you, what its limitations are. And really, we find that many organizations, do not necessarily understand as well as they possibly could all the creative things that technology can do and your provider can do for you. And you want to ensure that you have a provider that understands your organization and your culture and can help you to build that out, right? Auditing your current technology to see what its full potential is. I referred to that before. The other thing technology does is it really gives the opportunity, for you to have a shared drive. So, it speaks to hybrid workplace and how people communicate with one another, how much they can share with each other. And it really enables people, and to go back to engagement and culture, technology really helps support your culture. So I think a really very critical part of everything we've been talking about today. And of course, we could not talk about technology without mentioning AI, which will be to some degree at some point kind of managed from a legal standpoint. But then you as an organization will want to determine what your practices will be relative to AI and where it adds value and where it does not. So we're all learning about it as we go.
Certainly are.
To go further?
Yeah. We only have about a minute, so I just want to, I'll just breeze through this, but I want to encourage anyone who has any final questions, please type them in the chat and we'll get to them. This slide basically want to just talk about employee perks. Employees are looking for different benefits these days. It's not just health insurance anymore. It's not just dental and vision. They're looking for benefits. They're asking about, I can't say enough how many times in an enrollment meeting I get asked about pet insurance. And then that goes back to our mental health, right? Pets support mental health. Pets can be a very strong supporter of mental health. And so people are really, really engaged in helping their pets. And so we get asked this all the time. So pet insurance might be something you want to add to your benefit program. Gym memberships have been around for years, but that's a needed benefit. We get a high instance of identity theft. People are asking about, and involuntary benefits, which at one point employers were looking at those as a nuisance because they were additional payroll deductions and they didn't think anybody would take them. But now employees are asking about voluntary benefits like AFLAC and Colonials and the Mass Mutual life insurance programs of the world. Benefits that support employees' financial well-being, again, fits that whole narrative of driving down stress, being financially well, causes less stress, and supports mental health. So all of these things are needed benefits more than ever. And FSA, of course, is something that's an uptick. And I think as we see higher benefit costs, higher out-of-pocket deductibles and co-pays because of that, flex spending accounts are things that employees are going to look for even more. And then I won't go through the last couple of slides because we do have a question, but I will say, take a look at your employee education model. You can have a proactive or a reactive model. Proactive means you're engaging employees during open enrollment all the time. We have some stats here that will talk about how employees are looking for this. They're looking for help with making benefit elections. making suitable financial decisions for their family. And you can do that through your partners, either on a proactive basis where every employee gets a one-on-one session, or a reactive basis where you give an employees a hotline of some sorts or a consultation link that they can get in touch with somebody one-on-one, at least during open enrollment, if not during the year. Want to go back to a question for Jill here. Jill, we have something here. How do you go about auditing technology?
Auditing technology. Well, I think it's important, I think the first thing that you want to do is look at what your current technology is and speak to the provider of that technology to identify what it is that you have and what the opportunities are for expanding that. So some of them are things that will not cost you anymore, that you just didn't know that you had. And some of them will be additional costs. I think that it'll be important to look at, from the standpoint internally, of what your organization needs. You know, you may be very much, as you look at performance reviews, deciding that you really want performance technology to be a separate module. So I think it is partially around what the employer views as, is important, and the other is what employees want, and how really you make your processes smoother, right? And I think that it really is looking at employee input, what processes you have in place, and how you enhance your employee practices. And again, some of that is survey, feedback, looking at people's roles, looking at job descriptions, speaking to your provider, evaluating whether there are other providers where there could be intersection. So I think it's really about doing your homework and assessing and evaluating in terms of an audit before you make further decisions. I hope that was helpful.
I think that was great. So why don't you type your contact information, email in the chat? I am doing that as well. I think we need to wrap up at this time because I know we have to get to other sessions. I want to be mindful of time right now. My email is in the chat right now. Jill's going to do that as well. If you could have any questions about anything we talked about, anything benefit or HR related, that you just want to run by us or get an answer on, please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have. I thank you for being with us today. This was a great session. We hope that you got a lot of value out of that. And I personally look forward to connecting with you in the future. Jill, any final thoughts from you?
Thank you. We're sorry that we weren't able to see all of you, but we so appreciate that you joined us today and look forward to answering any questions you have in the future.
Great.
And possibly seeing you later today in the final hours of this event.
Okay.
Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hope you enjoy the rest of the panels that we have. Have a great day.